Hi, and welcome to another podcast series with myself, Rick Adams, the CEO of PracticalCSM.com. And today I am pleased to introduce you to Anita Toth. Anita is and this is her title, Chief Churn Crusher at her consulting agency, Anita Toth, Inc. She works with B2B SaaS companies to increase their revenues and reduce churn by understanding what's causing their once happy customers to become so unhappy that they choose to leave. Anita's got a 90-day retention accelerator program, and she uses 20 plus years of academic qualitative research experience to raise her clients' customer retention rates in as little as 90 days. So, Anita, first of all, welcome and thank you very much for being with us today.
Oh, thanks so much, Rick. Glad to be here.
And our topic is churn and how to avoid it. And of course, this is very much central to customer success. And we were just chatting beforehand, you're not actually a CSM, but you've got this amazing, wonderful experience around customer feedback and churn and customer retention. And I think that the stuff that you've got is really, really powerful in the customer success field. And I'm sure that you've seen in your consulting how over that 20 years, how customer success has become more and more important within the field of customer retention and churn reduction. So perhaps before we kick in, I don't know if there's anything you want to add to that description of yourself, or maybe just give a 2-minute intro to who you are, maybe a bio of how you got to where you were.
Yeah, absolutely. So as you mentioned, I have all of those years. I worked in a university and we were in a research institute. And this is what we did. We did qualitative research. So surveys, interviews, focus groups, and we ran all of that. And that's where I learned my practical skills, or clinical, if you will. And then, of course, I have a master's degree and a bachelor's degree as well, where I went through all of this. So well-versed in all things qualitative research. But unfortunately, 5-ish years ago, going on 6 years ago, government cut funding. It was very common that a lot of us in research at universities lost our jobs. So I didn't know what to do, bounced around. I had a Facebook ad agency, digital marketing agency. And then finally, I was like, I love talking to people. My biggest question in life is why? Why is it like this? And so I was looking like, what is a place where I can take all of those years of qualitative research methods and apply them to business in a way that really makes things better, both for the business and the customer. And that's how I landed in customer success. It was a very circuitous route. Yeah. It was definitely not direct. But I started in SaaS with a friend's platform that led me to Churn. Churn led me to working with customer success. And it's been a few years now, and it's been awesome. Like it's beautiful how everything has come together.
Well, it makes a lot of sense to me. And I love the fact that you've got this program, the retention accelerator program, because I think, so often somebody's got like a part of the solution, but it's lovely, I think, to be able to hire someone in who's got the program that's going to really drive something that's measurable at the end of it. So good for you. And let me ask you this question, okay? Because you mentioned the expression qualitative research. Now, of course, there's also quantitative research, which is even harder to say. So what's the difference? What is qualitative research?
So it's what we would call unstructured data. We've heard of this, right? So unstructured data is not numbers. I think that's probably the easiest way. Quantitative is numbers. You can add, subtract, multiply. You can do all sorts of mathematical equations on those numbers and come up with results. Qualitative is everything else. So it is, and of course, what I do also encompasses voice of the customer, right. But specifically qualitative research methods means they're structured. You are going out and looking for these answers, either through a survey, a focus group, or an interview. Whereas, say, voice of the customer is so much more broad than that, right? With support tickets, and you've got social media. So that is really the difference between the two. Is one is numbers, and one is almost everything else is unstructured. It's a little more challenging to deal with. Because you can't just apply mathematical formulas. You've got to interpret, you've got to put things in context. And that can be a real challenge for people because frankly, it's overwhelming.
Right.
Like, there's a lot that you can analyze. Just let's say, even in our conversation that we're having now, if we were to transcribe this and analyze this, there are so many different things we can get just from like 1 30-minute interview. Now imagine multiplying this by 10 or 50 or 100, and then add in all the other data you might get through your voice of customer. It can be overwhelming.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, thank you for that. I think it's important to understand, and both qualitative and quantitative have their places, right? I mean, apologies for dogs barking in the background. Go on, dogs. Come on, push off. Go away. Yeah, what was I saying? Yes, so qualitative and quantitative is but both have their place, right? But the way I see it, just to be absolutely clear, is like an example of quantitative would be where you've got a survey form that maybe asks you a lot of questions, but each question you're just answering like rate me 1 out of 5. So you just go through going, that's a 3, that's a 4, that's a 1, that's a 2, that's a 3, that's a 5. And at the end of that, well, then you could ask 1,000 people, and if you've got 1,000 responses, then you could say, well, the average for question 3 was 2.6, and the average for question 7 was a 4.1, and that tells you something interesting. But then, if you've got something interesting, well, the average there's a 2.6. You might ask yourself, well, why is it a 2.6? And now you need Anita.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's when you could then design a more in-depth like survey, or as you said, interview or focus group, where you then ask unstructured qualitative questions which require a thought from the person and a response in sort of paragraphs or sentences which you would actually notate down and actually then analyze and consider their answers, so you get the depth. So the qualitative gives you the breadth, and then you can look down and see, well, here's where the 3 problems lie, and then you can deep dive into them with the depth then of qualitative. Am I close, or
Yeah, you are. And actually, there's one thing I want to add, Rick. Yes and no questions are quantitative.
Right. Yeah.
Because you can add them up. You know, we had 50
yeses, 10. Effectively. Yeah.
Right. So your yes or no, maybe, unsure, any of those where it's just like a radio button or a checkbox or anything where you're not typing, essentially would be quantitative. And the qualitative.
If you add the word why or how.
There you go. There you go. Yep.
Okay, good. So I think I think that's useful just as a start point. So we can maybe use quantitative initially to like work out where the problems lie, and then qualitative to pin down more detail about those to actually understand them, so that we can do something about it. So let's start with some very first principles around churn. Your chief churn crusher. So you're going to know all about this. What is churn? Give me your sort of the Anita Toth dictionary definition for churn.
The Anita Toth dictionary definition is when a customer is no longer a customer.
Okay.
They leave.
Easy.
Simply put.
And let me be also clear then. Is churn the exact opposite of retention, or is there any difference between those?
Oh, good. You know what, Rick? I've never even thought of that. I look at it that retention is the flip side to it. So even if they've canceled, they are still a customer technically, right? Until they have walked away and they are no longer using the product, they're no longer paying money, done. So retention is the flip side. Yeah, that's generally how I look at it. I'm sure though that now you got me thinking. I'm going to walk away from this interview and I'm probably going to have a whole bunch of thoughts about that and really parsing it out. But I think generally the easiest way is to say churn is when they're no longer, and retention is any activity to keep them from churning or keep them as long as you can as a customer.
But in broad essence, let's say we have 100 existing customers,
Yep.
and 30 churn, then 70 are retained.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yep.
the retention figure plus your churn figure should always add up to 100% of your existing.
100%. Right.
Cool.
Right.
So those are our simple definitions for retained and churned, as it were. All right, good. Well, I'm glad we got that out of the way. So, all right, another simple question. Why is churn so important? What makes it a critical aspect, perhaps particularly of a B2B SaaS business, to manage churn so carefully? What's important about it?
So what's important about it is how expensive it is every time a customer churns. And most companies, what they end up doing is they just account for the immediate lost revenues. So this month, or, for whatever period of time you're measuring,
Right.
those revenues are now no longer counted. The customer's moved on. What the real impact, and these are sort of external, it's kind of like qualitative research. It's difficult to quantify, but you have lost opportunities. And that to me is actually the most expensive part. So you can't upsell to them anymore if they've churned. You can't cross-sell. You can't renew. Likely, if it was, they were leaving because they were unhappy, then you have now negative word of mouth marketing. Whereas if they're a happy customer, you have positive word of mouth marketing, which we know makes a difference. And then also with referrals.
Absolutely.
So every time a customer churns, it's not just that immediate loss revenue, which is easy to quantify. It's all of those other opportunities that walk out the door too.
Right.
And that's, there's an article that I read a long time ago by Jason Lemkin. He's with SaaStr. And he said that those lost opportunities can be worth as much as 2 to 3 times your current lifetime value of your customers.
Well, that was exactly what I was going to say. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah. So the simple calculation, surely, at least would be the CLV, the customer lifetime value.
Right. Yep.
But even then, as you say, that is not allowing for advocacy. That is not allowing for the fact that you may be expanding your portfolio in the future and have more to sell. It is not allowing for the fact that you may be able to improve your products based upon the feedback that this loyal customer would have been giving you about your products to make them better.
Yep.
There's just no end to it, isn't there? So, okay,
Yeah.
I think that's a really important point. So thank you for making that. So this is, churn is so important because if you end up with new customers all the time, you never form the same relationships. You're always going to be superficial with the customer. If it's first year only with them, they treat you as a supplier, not a partner. You never get to the top table to discuss the big projects with them.
Right.
I mean, have I missed anything? I better have.
No, I think,
right?
yeah, and you've really hit it there as well. So, the things I focused on are one part, but you're right. Like relationships take time to develop, and you can't do that quickly.
Typically, a customer will give you a small deal because a new supplier is a higher risk, and then will only give you a bigger deal once you've proved your worth. So. There we go. Okay. All right. So I think we're clear that managing churn is pretty important. Is it only relevant to SaaS companies?
It isn't. I know like productized services also focus on churn. I think it's becoming, as the subscription model seems to be moving to different types of companies,
Yeah.
churn then just naturally comes with it. So as it's not just SaaS, but like I said, productized services, and then other subscription models, so e-com being another one. So as time goes on and more, especially after COVID hit and so many companies had to rethink how they were selling, I know the subscription model has become more popular and there's been pivots toward it. So I don't think churn is going to be less of an important metric. I think it's going to become more important as time goes on. I just really, really hope that people stop to think about that immediate loss revenue. And like we talked about, it's kind of like I have an image of an iceberg that I use, and the immediate loss revenue is that top that's visible, but underneath the surface is all those things you and I talked about that also walk out the door every time a customer churns. That's kind of like my little soapbox, if you will. I'm trying to get people to realize how important retention and churn are.